just want to introduce myself. Good morning, I'm Nina Axelson. I'm the Head of Sustainability and Outreach for Evergreen Energy, and I'm your moderator for this session this morning. I'm going to give just a little bit of context and overview of Evergreen Energy and our corporate social responsibility platform, which we just launched today. So it's an exciting moment to be joined by friends and colleagues for the discussion. But we'll just spend a few minutes on this, and I won't keep you from the panelists very long, I promise. I know that that's why we're all here today, is for this really lively conversation with these experts in corporate social responsibility and impact in the energy sector. So for those who are a little less familiar with Evergreen Energy, I just want to, again, give an introduction to us. And we are a utility and engineering organization. Many of you know us for our flagship operation, District Energy St. Paul. We now operate utility systems in Duluth, Wisconsin, Ohio, and we'll be starting up our first operation in San Francisco, California, which features a geo-exchange technology and our first time delving into black water recycling as methods to reaching net zero carbon for a very sustainable development known as the Mission Rock project. This is all covered within our inaugural CSR report, which dives into the details of the operations, the programs, and what's really important to us is that we're offering it through a lens of our company values, which center on environmental stewardship, operating our systems with excellence, and most importantly, leading with the idea that people matter. The platform is a blend of stories and statistics with an introduction of a new approach for tracking and measuring environmental impact. With this first 2019 report, I guess that is our mea culpa for a COVID delay, but highlighting the carbon and fuel mix for our operations. We are also tracking water conservation and looking at system efficiency as a whole. Those of you who have worked with us know we are always thinking about the entirety of the system and how this all fits into the idea of energy productivity, inputs, outputs, the whole kit and caboodle. So really trying to delve into those things, but only reporting on those first two metrics in this 2019 report. Above all else, we want to make sure that we convey to the guests today that we know this work only happens when we work in partnership and collaboration. We hope you will take the time to explore the site and the report, to reach out to us with your thoughts and ideas about how we can advance this work and continue to work together toward greater impact. I will put a link to the report in the chat. So if folks want to go and check out the report and the videos and some of the other things we've put together with those stories. So thank you to the panelists and the guests for being patient as we offer a little bit of that context and perspective for the work, and really a big part of the why for having this conversation today. Talking with one of our panelists earlier today, whenever we come through this idea of bettering our systems and making change, none of it happens without partners. And so what better way to launch our CSR platform than to invite some of our favorite partners and really tremendous industry leaders to offer their perspectives on these things. So a few quick logistics before I hand it off to our first panelist for an introduction. There are several questions lined up for today, and there's a chance we may not be able to get to Q&A questions. However, I still really want to encourage that if you have them, to put them into the Q&A function. If it's a follow-up question to a panelist comment, I'll make sure to try and weave it in a timely manner. If we don't get to it today, we still want to be responsive to you, and we still want to keep the conversation going. So please don't hesitate if it seems like we're not going to get to additional questions to put something in there. And we'll try and have that follow-up come out with the recording of the panel from today. With that, I'm so pleased to welcome this incredible group of panelists. I'm so pleased to have folks that we've worked with for a long time and newer partners, representing such a great cross-section of our sector, organizations I admire for their commitments to a triple bottom line of environment, economics, and equity. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to get things rolling. Laura, would you please start us off?
There we go. Thank you, Nina. My name is Laura Tierney. I am the Director of International Programs and Manager of Communications for the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. And I'm pinch hitting here for our president, Lisa Jacobson, who sends her regards. And I'd have to say that we definitely value partnership as well. And our hook into this community here is through the Clean Energy Economy Minnesota. So Shout out to Greg and his staff. We have worked with them over the past several years to launch I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's a great fact sheet on the state of clean energy in Minnesota that we co-produce in partnership with Bloomberg New Energy Finance. But let me back up a bit to introduce the Business Council to you all. We are a trade association representing the clean energy portfolio of existing solutions from the energy efficiency, natural gas, and renewable energy sectors in the United States. We were founded in 1992 by industry leaders that came together and saw a need to present a portfolio approach in advance of the first Earth Summit. So sustainability is in the core foundation of our organization's group, but we are now mainly a policy advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C. So within our membership, we have both companies, utilities, and then trade associations from those sectors. So we're a coalition of coalitions. And our policy work does focus at the national level. As I mentioned, I manage the international programs, and so that brings our advocacy to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Clean Energy Ministerial, and other gatherings globally. And then at the state level through partners, such as those on the call today, and then also through state-based organizations that represent the broad swath of energy officials, clean air officials, utility commissioners, and the like. So those are some of our partners at the state level. So I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Laura. We're so excited to have you as part of the conversation today. Peter, could I ask you to go next?
Sure. Good morning. It's great to see you, Nina. My name is Peter Frosch. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater MSP Partnership. Greater MSP is the Regional Economic Development Partnership for the 15-county Minneapolis-St. Paul region. And we are a partnership, over 300 organizations, businesses, universities, foundations, counties, cities, startups, and others working for inclusive economic growth in our region and to increase our region's national and global competitiveness. And many of your organizations are investors and active partners in Greater MSP. Together, we conduct independent analysis of the economy and benchmark against peers. We shape regional economic strategy. And most importantly, we take action together. So Greater MSP is powered by dozens of teams that are executing against the strategy. Excited about the conversation today about CSR. And one of the things that I think brings Greater MSP into this conversation, in addition to having many corporate members and leaders in Greater MSP who are very active and on the leading edge of all of these conversations, I think there's a trend and maybe even a shift for CSR moving from standards of corporate citizenship to something even more material, into corporate strategy. And Greater MSP as a partnership in our region, we're seeing the need to be a part of that shift. Our thesis is that the region not only needs to lead on talent attraction and retention and our innovation ecosystem, which would be established factors of competition for region, but we also have to lead on race equity and on creating solutions to the world's climate-related challenges. So we see the right things to do are quickly becoming strategic imperatives, things that we have to do if we want to compete and win.
Thank you, Peter. It's so great to be able to have a mix today of folks who are working at regional, national level, and really being able to represent such different business interests and community interests. And as we shift over to Joffrey, being able to really center on how one business with a big reach has been able to take this perspective. Joffrey, could you please give us an introduction?
Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here today. My name is Joffrey Wison, and I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Mortenson. Prior to the current role that I'm in, I worked in one of the energy businesses called Energy Storage and Solutions, which focuses on battery storage, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and microgrids. Really excited to be here. A little bit about Mortenson for those of you that don't know about the company. We started in 1954 in commercial construction in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And over the years, we've expanded in terms of geographic presence. but also in terms of different businesses. So today the business has evolved into three key spaces, providing engineering, procurement, and construction services for commercial construction. So think of stadiums, higher education, hospitals, data centers. Those are some of the commercial business types that we're in. Commercial real estate development, so medical office buildings and hospitality are those spaces. And then the third space really tied to today, energy and infrastructure. So we got into the wind business, designing and building wind and eventually solar. And over the years, we moved into new energy spaces. So building high voltage transmission, battery storage, EV charging, and microgrids. So the business has evolved quite a bit in our 60-year history. But I'm really excited about this conversation. Friends and partners of Evergreen Energy, helping to execute some of the projects alongside with them. But also excited because I definitely see an intersection between the topics of diversity, equity, inclusion, and energy, inequities that have been in place in the past and writing those today. There's an intersection that does take place that I'm sure we'll dive into a little bit today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joffrey. It is really exciting, especially since some of the projects that we're working on together, I know have been in the hopper for a long time. And so now that construction is on the horizon, it's so much to celebrate. Holly, we'd love to have you go next in our introductions.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. I'm Holly Ladd. I'm an energy manager with Target. I don't think I have to introduce Target too much, but obviously we're a national company in all 50 states. We're proud of our headquarters here in Minnesota, the long history out of the Dayton Corporation. I would say 20 years ago, the energy team at Target, where I work today, was maybe a couple of people who made sure our bills were paid. And starting 17 years ago with our first store with rooftop solar, started to realize that energy isn't just a one-way expense function, but really an opportunity to create additional revenue streams out of our big boxes and go beyond of our own four walls into investments in the wholesale market. And now it's how do we serve our guests, our customers, which are obviously the core of a retail business with EV charging expansion, circular take-back programs, circular economy design. It's exciting times of just how fast this moved within a traditional retailer to rethink our whole business structure. And so that's what I'm excited to talk about today and hold some of that for our Q&A. But I think it's, it takes a village, and working with Mortenson, who has, been part of some of our projects, to Evergreen and utilities that service us. You can't do it alone because energy is integrated so much in our economy. So that's why these kind of calls are really important to us.
Thank you, Holly. I appreciate that perspective so much. Having had the opportunity to work with Holly in a lot of different fashions and her leadership on moving the industry, it's really so great to have you with us. So it's certainly my privilege to hand the last introduction over to Ken Smith, the CEO of Evergreen Energy. I just have to note that it was 12 years ago yesterday that I had the privilege of coming to work with Ken at Evergreen. I joke that he had worked with me a couple years before, so he knew what he's getting into, but maybe 12 years later, he feels a little differently about it. So happy anniversary to our work together, Ken, and I have you introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, Ken Smith, and 12 years. Wow, Nina. I remember you telling me you were going to work with me for maybe 2. So I win. You've already mentioned about Evergreen Energy and our work. As a developer, operator, and owner of systems, we work really entirely on community energy, and community being college and university, hospital campuses, brownfield, greenfields, or downtown. And that's really our focus area for our business. And as a result, we work in community all the time. We work in partnership all the time. We have to collaborate in order to find solutions to meet the objectives. For us, it all starts with our values, which are elemental to our business and how we approach our business, to those that depend upon us, how we approach our customers, delivering with excellence. But it's more than just our approach. It's also about, we look at things holistically, and Nina mentioned that earlier. So we're looking at how do we deliver energy reliably, which is always, if you survey customers, they always want reliable energy. But then you get to the next things, and they're looking increasingly for resilience. They're looking for efficiency. We also use we also move towards how do we use data analytics to inform smart decisions, and then ultimately decarbonize the systems that we are involved in, either in the development phases or as we get involved in operations, putting in place pathways in order to achieve decarbonization of the systems.
Thank you, Ken. So that's fantastic start to things here, folks. Thanks for offering that context that I think really helped everybody understand sort of the baseline as we jump into the list of questions. So I'd like to start by directing a question to Holly and Joffrey. Your organizations are known for long-standing commitment to CSR. Can you share some of the commitments and activities that are key to your company and its mission? Holly, I'd ask you to jump first here.
Yeah, how much time do I have?
I wish we had
there's
4
a lot
hours together today. I know you guys can fill it.
So, we actually recently did an inventory of how many like goals within what you might call CSR we have out there, and it was like 54. So it's getting to be a lot, and we're actually in a process of how to try to streamline that. But I think I'll highlight a few. My heart is in our energy and climate work, and so I do want to call out we have what's called a science-based target initiative, Approved Target, which is a consortium of NGOs that look at company goals and say, is this really in line with what science is telling us we need to do to prevent the worst of climate impact? So we have a commitment to reduce not just our operations, but our upstream supply chain climate emissions 30% by the year 2030. So in greenhouse gas talk, that's scope 3 emissions. And while it's quite a bit of work as we're sourcing renewable energy across the country for our 100% renewable electricity goal that accompanies that, it's really working with our supply chain domestically and internationally is the larger task that we're gearing up for. So that's the sweet space I live in, is the numbers that go with that. But it really does permeate our business and shows that financial value of, again, we have over 500 stores now with rooftop solar, including about 10 here in Minnesota that we've worked hard to make a possibility through policy collaborations with other customers. And then we're also really focused on the connection with energy and equity. It's not surprising to people on this call that the #1 fastest growing job in America is PV solar installer. And so how can we couple our significant investment around the country with our goals? We have a program called REACH. I don't, as many acronyms, know exactly all the components of it, but it's how do we improve employment opportunities, investments with Black-owned businesses and other minority-owned businesses in the communities. And so I'm really excited about the energy work we're doing, how we couple it with a lot of the workforce development discussions that people on this call are having. So there's a plethora, and that's not even touching all the products and the circular design work that a whole bunch of our team is doing. So I could go on and on, but I like something Peter said that I want to like reflect on this conversation is it's really great to see Evergreen put the CSR report on there. I really appreciate the data pieces in there. This is moving away from a nice to have report to something that I hope in the future is analogous to a 10K statement or a 10Q or financial disclosure that has to happen, because that's how serious it is as part of our business. And sometimes these can be painted as more of a marketing or communications tool, but no, these are critical documents that document your investment and the risks and exposure. So that's what I'm excited to see this space moving into, is like mandatory reporting and making that consistent that people can really glean insights of your organization.
Thank you, Holly. You cover a lot of ground in a short time there and really salient points. Joffrey, could you also comment?
Sure. I know this is being recorded. You all probably noticed my background changing. So we're in a house right now. My wife and 2 kids are here. So I moved to what I think is a better location for this webinar. So I'll acknowledge that first. To your question, I think before getting to some of the what we're doing, I do want to make sure I acknowledge some of the why. So I'm glad you asked about one's mission or purpose. And for Mortenson, our purpose is building structures and facilities for the advancement of modern society. When we think about advancement of modern society, certainly we think about things like climate change and renewable energy and becoming more efficient with what it is we are building. And for us, there's two things I would point to. One is our own facilities across the country. There are the facilities where we operate today. There are also facilities that we develop, and there are some facilities that we own that others actually operate within. So definitely working to make sure that we lessen our footprint with respect to those facilities as they're being built, and how do we make sure that we're operating in an efficient manner, bringing in things like renewable energy and solar panels into our headquarters is something that we've taken the step to do. Establishing more sustainability in our fleet with hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles, and establishing EV charging infrastructure. So some of that is tied to what Mortenson is doing with our own buildings. But I think it's also important to think about our customers. You know, as an engineering, procurement, and construction firm, we help our customers achieve their energy goals. What we're seeing that is unique today is commercial customers ask about energy today. And our energy business was very separate from our commercial business once upon a time. But now a commercial customer will ask, you know, how can I reduce energy costs? How can I become more resilient? How can I reduce my footprint? So a lot of the work that we're doing today is helping our customers do energy modeling so that they can have the facilities that are going to meet their long-term goals. And we have engineers and construction team members that get really excited about executing those projects. So putting wind farms and solar farms into place, putting energy systems into commercial buildings. I think that the future is extremely bright, and seeing those two parts of our businesses come together to help commercial buildings and structures be more futuristic and more energy efficient is something we're really excited about.
Thank you, Joffrey. I appreciate that that insight. It's really great to hear that, not just what Mortenson is doing, but just that ripple effect within all your partners and clients. That's really interesting to hear, and probably a great setup for the next question for Peter and Laura. Looking at all the stakeholders in your work, which is a really broad set of folks. And the fact that you're both working on national and regional level. So I'd like you to be able to speak to some of those major trends in socially responsible business. Peter, I'm going to ask you to maybe take this one first and speak to what you're seeing.
Sure. I think it's about the changes that are occurring and what's driving those changes. So, you know, in 2020, when so much has changed and so much continues to change, we've all observed, I think, the standards evolving for CSR and corporate citizenship. You know, maybe the most noticeable or notable trend in CSR and citizenship has been a stronger public statement and a set of commitments from companies around racial justice and equity. The killing of George Floyd and the uprising across the country for racial justice and equity that resulted, you know, led maybe very visibly to the affiliation of dozens of national corporations with the Black Lives Matter movement. And that was a shift. And one of the forces driving that shift appeared to be the reaction and expectations of employees within the companies. And a push to step out with bolder statements and action on racial justice, you know, coming from within. I heard that from many executives of companies in this region, you know, and certainly read about it elsewhere. And that was in addition to the positive pressure from customers and the public. You know, as we talk about environmental sustainability, we talk about climate, we talk about energy, you know, what's happening, you know, this year around racial justice within companies from the employee base is happening in those areas too. And I think you put all those things together, and what we might be observing is a change in the calculation of risk. You know, the judgment that companies are making seem to be that it's more of a risk not to be out in front and assertive with a message and a set of commitments on racial justice or climate than it is to remain quiet. And in just very recently, last year and in previous years, I kind of observed the reasoning for holding back might have been concern about getting called out for lack of action, or not being able to demonstrate results. And those calls for accountability certainly have come in response to what companies have said they care about and they're going to do around racial justice and equity and climate. But that now there's a dialogue, and companies are working through it, and it has created a market for solutions. So, that's some of what I'm seeing in the CSR ecosystem, and maybe kind of reinforcing that idea of once you get out there with a set of commitments that are broad and quite significant in scale, whether it's racial justice or climate, it becomes strategy because it affects the way you plan, and it forces you to aim all of your innovation and R&D and your best thinking towards driving some of those solutions.
Thank you, Peter. That's really insightful. And it feels like you just brought together some things you kind of hear in the buzz a lot, and just really grounded them in the way that we're seeing it manifest in companies. So thank you for that. Laura, could you add your perspective?
I think one thing that I'm hearing from all of the panelists, and also a trend that we note, is that there is a shift in customer demand. And we all have different customers and clients that we service and we partner and work with. But I think that demand is clear for clean energy. There's support for climate action. I think America's Pledge report that was released in September, and that's a group out of Rocky Mountain Institute and some other collaboration in terms of tracking support for climate action by states and cities and businesses. I think we have a number of over 70% of Americans do support this idea of a clean energy economy. And so reacting to that demand, also a recognition that the diversity of the customer base is changing in America. And so it's not a matter of getting ahead of things, but it's just smart strategic planning in terms of recognizing that that is changing as well. I think on the technology side, to Holly's point about the sweet spot between energy and climate, I think corporate leadership in procuring renewable energy that Target has exemplified is also really shifting the needle in terms of supply of clean energy in America. And I think also exciting technology developments in energy storage, which Joffrey mentioned, the Internet of Things, how everything can be advanced at an exponential speed now that we are more digitally connected, to kind of knit together renewable energy and building efficiency. And we can make some real quick gains in terms of energy efficiency, emissions reductions. And to Ken's point, sustainability, what are the customers demanding? And we put at the heart of that also sustainability, affordability, efficiency, reliance, resilience, reliability. All of these are shared tenets that we are building our policy advocacy around. So I think that there's a lot happening. I think to Peter's point about what the racial justice movement that has been revealed to our members. I'm sorry, that was ineloquent the way I said that. But with the COVID pandemic, first, highlighting all the fissures in our society in terms of equity around healthcare, and the importance of providing energy as a resilient service. I'm gonna pause. I'll turn it back to you, Nina.
No, that's all really great observation, Laura. I think everybody is in this same shared space today where big ideas and such impactful both opportunities and risks. So it's a lot. We did get a follow-up question, and I think this would be a good moment to open this particular question up to the rest of the panel. With the interrelationship of climate and racial justice, how do the panelists see measures like return on investment changing when evaluating climate action related projects. So, you know, I could see that really landing with any of you. I don't know if anybody has had a very specific conversation with your organization. I know within ours, there's certainly a lot of discussion about how kind of an impact of carbon pricing, even when there's not a federal standard, comes into that. But do others want to jump on this? I see Joffrey reaching for the button.
Yeah, this is somewhat connected to what Peter shared a moment ago. And what I would say is there's been intentionality in terms of locking individuals out of opportunities, job opportunities, housing opportunities, so on and so forth. There has also been intentionality that's led to challenging challenges with respect to the environments that people live in. So we think about where emissions exist and where industrial plants are. They're largely where people of color have lived. So there's been intentionality on one side. I think we have to have intentionality on the other side now. So there is going to be need for more infrastructure to address climate change, to address aging infrastructure, to address the goals that cities and states are putting forth. We want more renewables, we want more resilience, so on and so forth. So I think the real opportunity here is to make sure that we're intentional in creating opportunities for those that have been locked out in the past. One of the key things that I do think about in the construction industry that's applicable to this, if there's a public project or a project that has public money, we actually make sure that we have specific goals in terms of our employee base and how we're spending our dollars and supplier diversity, so on and so forth. The same thing can take place in the energy space. So as utilities put out RFPs, as developers are establishing projects, as Mortenson is executing projects, how do we make sure that we're working with the organizations that are training up and developing those who have been locked out in the past? So there's a real intersection that exists here. And the economy is in a challenging place right now. And I do think that infrastructure investment is going to take us out of it. How do we make sure that it's equitable and that all can be a part of the rebuild process that's going to take place?
Yeah, maybe just to build on that. I mean, we, on the face of it, you know, advancing racial equity and, you know, getting closer to our climate goals and environmental sustainability may not seem that related, but once you get into execution, it's almost obvious, right? So the markets are shifting, have shifted, and they're accelerating really quickly in the space of creating the new jobs, you know, and new industries around adapting to climate change or climate solutions, environmental sustainability. We know that it's not speculative. You know, it was mentioned the fastest growing occupations, PV solar installer. This is happening. So workforce development was also mentioned. So we have this whole system and set of systems that exists to train folks. Well, you know, what we should be doing is really aggressively and intentionally focusing and aligning our training programs with opportunity. And the populations that are going to be taking fullest advantage of those programs are, you know, in our region, in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region, going to be disproportionately communities of color. So, you know, this is a big, this is a moment where we can advance two strategic aims simultaneously, you know, by linking, you know, training and workforce development, you know, that's going to create wealth and, you know, create career paths, which is absolute. Economic justice is a core part of racial justice. And, you know, we're going to need the labor force it takes to build this new climate economy, because otherwise that could be one of the things that slows down a transition.
Really great thoughts. Thank you, Peter and Joffrey. Ken, Holly, Laura, anything you'd want to add before we move to the next question?
Well, I think this has been a great exchange, and there's been some threads that have weaved through all of this. And I really like what you said, Peter, about that expectations become strategy. And expectations become goals that become strategy. So one of the things that we find so often we get involved in projects is they think they know what success looks like. And we always hit the pause button and step back. Do we really know what success looks like? Have we considered all of the factors? Have we really taken a holistic approach to the project? Is it just about getting an energy system in place, or is there some other things, some other factors that need to be considered? And so while we're in this time of accelerating change, no doubt about it, it's also a time to think about what does that success look like as we are reimagining the future, whether it's buildings, what's that modern society looks like, to look at what does that future look like and what can we accomplish as we're rebuilding our infrastructure, as we're rebuilding our communities, and really provide opportunities for all.
Yeah, I would just say a example of everything people said is that we've started when we're going out to RFP for solar or wind projects, like we want not just a narrative of the EPCs firms workforce diversity inclusion work. I want a document of what that workforce looked like, how much investment was made in that community, the tax benefits that were generating in that community. I need all that to then go make the case of this business value, both internally and externally. So we've been really worked on like getting the data, and if you build it in your RFP as like, I want your price per watt, I want all these components, and I want some other numbers. I'm not trying to boil the story down to numbers, but it starts to really push further down within companies that they have to respond and get something in there. So it becomes less ambiguous or amorphous, if you will, and tactile. So that's my little sliver of this work that we're pushing in Target.
Thanks, everyone. Just a really great balance of how we think about the qualitative and quantitative aspects of this, which seem completely intertwined. So moving on to a little bit of a different question here is maybe broadening it a bit is I'm curious about the macro trends being realized within companies, and wondering, Ken, if you could start us off by sharing your experience with, we've had several conversations about this, of what's the rate of change, the technology change, the expectations. What are you seeing from the Evergreen perspective?
Well, it comes back to some of the things that were said earlier. Certainly, the rate return on investment, we are seeing people looking at taking a longer view. And again, what are we really trying to accomplish? If we're trying to decarbonize, we're trying to improve the efficiency of our system, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish? And what are the other things we can accomplish at the same time? Data is also going to be incredibly important. And so to Holly's comments, data, we can drive change in so many ways by actually digging into the data and also how energy systems are going to operate. In a future that is going to be increasingly decarbonized, it's going to be increasingly interconnected. It's a system that is going to be very variable in the energy sources that we use. And Joffrey mentioned storage earlier. And so there's going to be data exchange that's going to be occurring between customers, between service providers, that is going to be on a scale that we are not familiar with at this point. We do not have the systems. We don't have all of the protocols in place, but that is coming, and it's something that's going to create opportunity for us. So we're going to have a much more interconnected, interdependent system, and this is all coming very, very quickly. So the trends that I'm seeing are the system is changing. Folks want to change. They want to decarbonize. That has changed clearly, where the conversation was, how do I get more renewables on the system, to how do I decarbonize my business? And that then opens up a whole plethora of opportunity and challenges that need to be resolved.
Holly or Joffrey, would you like to add from that kind of just the company perspective there?
Maybe I'll start, Joffrey, and you can go ahead. Yeah, I think the data piece is really key, because when you start to put this in metrics that are both on the carbon piece, equate or levelize energy efficiency, renewable energy storage, all of that, it becomes a game changer. And then it makes it, has the substance as other metrics your business tracks. And so I will just say, I was really excited to bring it back to Evergreen CSR report that you guys put in the carbon intensity of your energy sources on cooling and heating basis. We have worked nationally with hundreds of electric utilities to try to get that data, and it's been a slow process, but there's increasingly pushed by customers to get that, because how do I tell the story of supporting this policy or signing on to this letter if I don't have the data that shows what this investment is doing for my company. So I just say that's really important. Thank you for doing that. I think on the policy side, like normally a lot of corporations would not wade into climate policy or energy policy before. It's not their core business, but the only way to actually achieve all these decarbonization goals in a market that it is still highly regulated is to get involved. And I think that's a trend you're seeing nationally with the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance and others, of companies with large names getting involved in a space that's not their core business. And so I'm really excited about that. And kind of looking ahead, I'm also excited about the infrastructure pieces that people have talked about. We are increasingly concerned at Target and other companies about the lack of transmission capacity to actually increase renewable energy, clean energy on the electric grid. It's an acute problem that is becoming, according to one article, making the upper Midwest a dead zone of renewable energy investment, end quote. So we are concerned if you can't get your product to market, it doesn't really matter what's happening on the levelized cost basis of some of these projects. So that is something that on the customer side that is getting more attention, which I don't think any end use customer was thinking about transmission networks even 5 years ago at a large scale level. So that is what a big opportunity and also a big risk to actually meeting our goals. Those are some of the trends I'm interested in.
Thanks, Holly. Joffrey?
I'll reference two. One is the fact that we see more and more companies that want to own their own energy future. So whether that is resilience or whether that's managing costs or taking advantage of policies that are in place. So that broader trend is there. And the technologies are evolving. One of the unique things that I'm seeing is creativity and innovation as it pertains to making sure these deals can actually pencil. So there is the case that we should be addressing climate change because it's the right thing to do. And if we want our children's children to have a better environment, we need to do things today. There's also the reality that decisions are made based upon the economics. So when I think about some of the economic tools that are out there, I think about evergreen energy and some of your counterparts that can own, operate, or finance energy systems. So some of that is expertise in manufacturing good. They don't have to worry about managing or operating an energy system. There are third parties that will come in and provide energy as a service. I think there's going to be a lot more of that in the future. Folks that will come in, provide the right financial tools in order for a deal to work, because there are folks that can take advantage of revenue streams that not everyone can take advantage of. The other thing that I would talk to with respect to a trend is just the electrification of everything. The key conference we want to attend every year that was kind of number one on my list every year is called Electrification, believe it or not. EPRI actually hosts it, and it really just talks about how everything is becoming electrified, different assets being able to talk to each other, being able to leverage smart technologies. That's where the world is going. So those are the two big things for you. One, customers that want to take advantage of their own energy future and different tools that can enable them to do that. And then two, electrification of everything. One last thing that Holly did touch upon, policy, which I think is really important. I think about some of the things that enabled wind and solar to take off, and tax credits were a key component to that. A production tax credit, an investment tax credit, those actually help the industry move forward initially. And then you have the price of materials and the cost actually start to come down, and the industries can work on their own. I think we're going to see something similar in other spaces, putting policies into place to get some of these industries like EV charging and microgrids moving forward. Then costs come down and you have a type of scale that you didn't have in the beginning.
Maybe just to build on that, I mean, in terms of trends, I guess we kind of see that there's policy and there's technology and there's finance, and the interplay of those forces, makes markets. And, as we think about Minnesota, kind of one of the hallmark, the thing that launched, kind of our new energy economy in some ways was the big Prairie Island fight in the early 1990s, where it was a policy decision, that pushed the largest utility in the state, to do things that weren't in plan. And then technology started to catch up. All of these pieces are they're all working now, right? The policy kind of announcement in the last couple of months from California about, a future ban on gas-powered vehicles, we see how powerful, some of those government dictates can be. Then technology, I think we're in the phase where we're really seeing how technology is driving the current wave, bringing the cost of solar and wind down so that it's cheaper to operate, these technologies than gas plants, much less coal. But I think finance is now coming into play. And I think about, as we talked about trends and shifts, the letter that Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, sent, an open letter, right, to CEOs, I think it was earlier this year, about climate change and the global financial system, couldn't be more big picture and sweeping, where he's kind of laying out, some of his quotes, and I think were, the purpose is the engine of long-term profitability for a company. He said that our investment conviction is that sustainability and climate integrated portfolios can provide better risk adjustment returns to investors. And we believe that sustainable investing is the strongest foundation for client portfolios going forward. And it was a real shot across the bow to the global financial system to say, we think this is where everything's going. And what we think matters because we have billions of dollars. And if we're investing in your company, you better read this letter a couple of times. So I think we're seeing the dollars really align against the technology now. And that seems to be accelerating even just this year, some of these really big shifts. And it may put us in a place in 24 months or 36 months that we never thought was possible.
Thank you, Peter. What a great conversation on this topic. I'm going to shift gears a little. We've talked a lot today about the market forces, customer demand, technology, recognizing that some of us may have been avoiding some of the conversations about national policy making and really emphasizing what was happening at the local level, regional level for a number of years recently. But as we creep up on the turning point to 2021, Laura, I'd really like to have your perspective of what you're seeing at the national stage and some of the priorities for the incoming administration.
Sure, I'll take that easy question. We are here in Washington, recognizing that, as you mentioned, with the incoming Biden administration, that there's going to be a revitalization of energy and climate policy. I would say also to the point to the earlier discussion that this administration has made it clear that it will also be intentional about diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of how it staffs federal agencies. And then I think that that lens will be applied to its policy choices as well, at least from a predictive standpoint. We sit here waiting with everybody and probably expecting that we'll have a divided Congress. And so what does that mean, with a Republican-led Senate, possibly Democrat? We'll wait for the January 5th runoff in Georgia to make that final call. But I think what would be clear is that President-elect Biden, the art of the compromise is going to be at center stage. And so the BCSE, and when it works with its policy advocacy, we are seeking that middle lane for both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrats, to come together to advance energy policy. To Joffrey's point about the importance of tax credits, that's something that's still out there every year. We're working to extend those tax credits for renewable energy sectors and also for energy efficiency as well. Those have played a really big role in enabling this advancement that we've seen to date in clean energy. I think economic stimulus and a recovery package when we get to that point will also be key. I think we see that the clean energy sector as being the source of over 3.2 million jobs prior to the impact of the COVID pandemic. And the clean energy industry was particularly hard hit during the pandemic as well. So restoration and support to companies in the clean energy space, in the energy efficiency, building retrofit space, the tax credits are important to renewable energy sectors. Those sorts of things are on the table now, and we'd like to see them advance either in the lame duck or the beginning of the next Congress. I think all eyes are on that. I think we have to really seriously address the pandemic and the impact on the economy. But prior to the economy, you know, the Business Council produces an annual fact book, the Sustainable Energy in American Fact Book, that we release with Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And it's a great resource for all stakeholders in the energy space to take a look at and to see where the markets are. And so what we learned it just seems so silly to think about a world of February 2020, but in February 2020, we looked back on the previous decade and we saw these, wow, great growth sectors of the American economy, source of jobs and innovation. And we want to get back on that trajectory, and this opportunity for establishing economic recovery pathway, you know, projects that will answer the infrastructure needs that have been raised by panelists today, but do so in a low carbon and sustainable manner with a nod to the broad portfolio of clean energy solutions that we have on hand, could do a lot to bring together the pandemic recovery, equity, building out a more diverse workforce, and also meeting our climate change goals that states and cities have taken the leadership on over the past 4 years. And so we're excited for the opportunity to engage with a federal administration that values that as part of, you know, their Build Back Better transition plan right now is articulated climate change and economic recovery as being, you know, 2 of the 4 main pillars. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for those public-private partnerships to kind of come to the fore and to share their expertise and advancements that have been made.
Thank you, Laura. As we start to run out of time here, Peter, I'm going to try and bridge, you know, several areas of your expertise. You're no stranger to the DC policymaking world. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how some of these anticipated changes and trends really are going to start to influence things on the ground when we think about vitality and growth potential for greater MSP.
I mean, I think the headline might be, it always pays to be ready. You know, one of the things I learned in Washington, I worked for a member of the Minnesota delegation for 7 years in DC, and it was like, the moment comes, and if you don't have the idea, if the bill's not written, if the policy concept isn't there, it's too late, right? So I think this is true for policy. I think this is true for companies. I think it's true for regions, that you have to position to win. And this is not, it doesn't feel to me like this is a management moment. This is a leadership moment, because it takes leadership to anticipate, to say, this isn't what exists today, but this is the bet we're placing on what's coming. And so we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and that's going to put us in this position. So, you know, to your question, I think for our region and for our state, we don't know exactly what's around the corner in Washington, but a good plan is not, well, we'll find out and we'll see, you know, if anybody calls. It's a much better plan to get together and say, what's our strategy? Where do we want to go? And what kind of federal support would accelerate, you know, what we want to do? And then, you know, good would be ready for something to come. Better would be to be actively reaching out to the delegation, the administration, saying, you know, this is what we need in Minnesota and MSP to drive things forward. And I think, you know, it's important to be assertive when it comes to Washington, right? right? Like there are a lot of people out there, so you got to call. Don't wait for someone to call you.
Thank you, Peter. I just keep feeling like every single one of these questions could have been an hour on its own. So I appreciate how quickly you guys are changing course here and covering so many topics. I'm going to do it one last time here. We've heard a lot on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, economic opportunity with workforce development, jobs, talent retention really have come up several times in this conversation. And so maybe this is a good way to bring it back to people as we close out our session. So I really want to think about, within these organizations, where are you taking an approach to these topics, and recruitment and retention of talent in particular, which is going to be so key to all of this. And I'm going to ask Joffrey, who leads that work for Mortenson, to take the first swing at it.
Yeah, I'll try and be very brief here. So we have been focused on diversity, equity, inclusion for 5 years, though there was no department or point person. It was kind of everyone owned it. There was an advisory council. So a couple steps we've taken. One, we established a new team, small team, hopefully mighty, which I'm a part of, in June of this year, and starting to establish not only our aspirations and a strategic framework, but also bring in some external expertise to help us understand what is the current state, where do you want to go, and how do you get there. So we're bringing some help. In terms of one other thing I'll point to, in the construction industry, we bring in labor and partner with organizations in order to execute projects. We've taken a close look in terms of what our performance looks like there, and really want to try and transform the construction industry. So instead of transactional projects and you bring someone on for a project, we're trying to develop systems where the partners we work with, it's longer term. So Casillas Glass is an example, a BIPOC-owned glazing company that's doing some work for us today in the rebuild of the Twin Cities. How do we build relationship, help build capacity, and bring them on to the next stadium that we're actually building? So trying to really take what's in front of us right now to get to know new firms, build a relationship, and make sure it's not transactional. That's something that actually transforms the industry.
Thank you, Joffrey. Ken, looks like you'd like to add something?
Yeah. Well, for us, we've been working on this for the past few years. And one of the things we've done in the past year is go through all of our position descriptions, our handbook, our policies, and look for any kind of biases. And we use outside consultants to help us through that effort. And it's revealing when you do that. And so we found a number of things that we needed to improve, and we've done that. And that's been helping us with our workforce as we have new folks that we're hiring and as we continue to grow our business. And to an opportunity that was mentioned earlier by Joffrey, just as energy services are growing, people are outsourcing the operation and the redevelopment or the decarbonization of their energy systems. And that provides an opportunity to think about the workforce that they have and the workforce for tomorrow.
And Laura started our conversation with this, but as Nina and I are on the board of Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, I do want to flag they do a great job of really quantifying and documenting the workforce in Minnesota and clean energy, including people of color and women. And a lot of the data shows that the industry as a whole is less women than as a percentage of population, which I don't think is surprising if you've been at any of these conferences or tables. But how do we also think about bias, about what the job descriptions really require? So for example, I bring up, obviously no one's really traveling during COVID. So does your job really need to have X amount of travel in it, or what other ways can you be effective? I think those are some of the biases that people are seeing as who has what responsibility in our society. And also if you're not at the table, like how do you get seen and get those opportunities? And so both in the workforce training and also reaching out to people that you wouldn't think of is something that we work on a lot. So I just want to plug that as well.
Thank you. I really know that topic in particular, we're not giving the time and attention it needs in this moment, but I know we've talked about it through the session here. So we've come up on 12 o'clock. I recognize some of our panelists may have a 12 o'clock obligation and may need to step off, and as our guests might as well. But I do just want to offer just an opportunity to share any closing statements here. Ken, we had you go last in introductions. Maybe I'll let you go first here and at closing thought.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank all my panelists, my fellow panelists, for sharing a part of your day with us today and sharing your insights into CSR and trends and your business and just helping us navigate this future. The future is bright. I agree with Joffrey. There is tremendous opportunity.
Ken, we lost you. Want to try again there?
Okay, how's that? I don't know what happened. As we
It
set,
wasn't the gong, I swear.
okay, as we set ambitious goals and we strive to achieve them, we need partners and we need people on that journey with us. And so thank you for being a part of that journey with us, walking it with us, helping us be committed to it, and holding us accountable, and also helping us to think creatively and strive even higher. So thank you for being with us today.
Great. Holly?
Yeah, as Nina said, there's a lot we discussed for the last hour. My brain is a little swimming into all of it, but I just also just to bring it back, I just want to congratulate Evergreen on this big achievement and getting your CSR report out there. And again, like getting it in the hands of your customers, the campuses you serve, the districts you serve. That data is really illuminating, and so key, as I said, elevating the importance of this work to the respect and the respect and quality of data that we expect on financial reporting. That's really where I want to drive this, because it integrates it up the entire chain of the company. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Holly. Joffrey?
Well, thank you for inviting me to be a part of today. My last remark is just to encourage all of us to meet this moment. The technologies are there, they're evolving, policies coming, there's commitments that we can make, and I like Ken's word, accountable, and the DEI space as well. We're in the midst of a moment right now. 2020 has illuminated a lot. Let's take advantage of that and make a lot of progress. Thank you.
Peter?
Yep, this is not an incremental moment, it's a transformational moment. So we need big ideas. You know, I think we only have time for big ideas.
Laura?
If I were chatting, I would do the plus and you know, snap, support everything that people have said here today. But I think there's great leadership by the corporations and businesses that are represented on this call. And I think join us in the advocacy push to work with, as you said, as Peter said, call up your congressperson, and we can get some, you know, the right policy signals on the path that will enhance the market signals that are already in place for our clean energy future. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Well, I just have to express my deepest gratitude. This is like the dream team of panels in my mind. Just such great different perspectives and expertise. And I wish this was the first in a series with you folks, so maybe you'll get an invitation for a future session with us. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all the really thoughtful and dedicated work you're doing in your respective jobs to move the dial on these things. And thanks for our guests for being with us. Please check out the report. Please reach out to us to talk about how we can do more together, do better together. And man, Peter, I'm just gonna be sitting with the big ideas challenge for a while here. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye.